Welcome, everybody. It's really we're really glad to have you here this evening for our discussion. We're going to be talking about accountability in the arts and exploring the experiences of the art world through the lens of Black artists. So that's hopefully that's why you're here. We've got two brilliant speakers, facilitators that are going to be really sort of the main event for this evening. I'm going to be handing over to them both shortly, but just before that, I just wanted to do, my name's Asif Afridi. I work for brap as Deputy CEO, and just wanted to just give a little bit of background really around where this event sits, I suppose, in some work that we've been doing with some arts organisations. So, and I should mention just before I start, it's going to be quite an interactive event this evening. So you'll get a chance to talk to others. And I know Adaya and Elizabeth will probably want to say a bit more about that when I hand over to them. But one thing I also wanted to mention is that we are recording the event this evening as well, so that others in the sector will be able to see it as well. If you've got any particular concerns about that, just drop us a line in the chat, and we can always look at editing or something if for some reason you don't want to be featured. Okay, great. So I'm going to put up a really brief presentation just to share with you, just to tell you a bit about where this event sits as part of some of the a larger program that we're doing at brap. So it's funded, the event itself is funded by Caluce Gulbenkian Foundation with their support. And this event is part of something which is called the Pact Pioneer Programme. And I wanted to tell you a little bit about it because you might be interested in it. We're basically a collective of individuals, organisations, networks who are looking at this issue of how power can be shared and used more effectively in different parts of civil society in the UK. And we've been doing that through two main learning programs. One of them is specifically like with arts and culture organisations and individuals. And then the other one's been more with the voluntary sector. And over the coming months, the reason I wanted to tell you about it was over the coming months, what we're going to be doing is sharing some of the learning from these two programs. And I already saw actually there were a couple of people who were on the programme who have joined this evening. It's really great to have you here. So what we're going to be doing is sharing some of what we've learned with the wider sector. So if you'd like to stay in touch with some of that, there's a few Twitter handles here which we can stick in the chat as well. And there's also a website which we'll put in the chat as well. And then the final thing to say is why accountability? You know, I mean, when I hand over to Elizabeth and Adaya, I know that they'll speak more about this, but from our perspective, like when we were doing the programme, it was a really important part of, I guess, like how we use and think about power, you know. So we were exploring things like, how do we choose to hold our feet to the fire? You know, who do we choose to hold us accountable? How are we accountable to the communities and the people we exist to serve? So that's the reason we were really interested in it as part of this program with the Pact Pioneer program. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand over. That's enough from me, really. I wanted to hand over to our two speakers who I know have lots to say on this issue. Really briefly, let me introduce both Adaya and Elizabeth. So Adaya Henry is community lead at Yard House, and Yard is an art house in Ladywood, Birmingham, set up by NAIA to nurture and resource the imaginations of local people and artists. I know Adaya is currently on a filmmaking journey, spending lots of time acting, writing, performing spoken word, and this includes writing comedy and working on debut solo show to be programmed by the end of the year. So we're really happy to have you here, Adaya. And then also Elizabeth Lawal, who is a producer, facilitator, host. Elizabeth is a writer of Exhale, a play exploring faith, sexuality and forgiveness, formerly head of community at Beat Freaks Collective, founder of the Arts Against Violence Network, founder of CVX Festival, Elizabeth's now heading up Inco Academy UK and currently on the board of Culture Centre, and is recognised in the Birmingham Mail 30 under 30, the stage 100 for the work that Elizabeth is. Are you getting embarrassed yet, Elizabeth?
Yeah.
Sorry. For More Than a Moment, action with and for the Black creative workforce. So that's enough for the bios. We're so grateful that you've joined us, and we're really lucky to have you. So I'm going to hand over to you now. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We were going to do like a mini intro, but I think Asif kind of covered it all really. So I'm just going to do like a little bit of housekeeping. I'm sure we're all used to Zoom by now, but just in case you're not, there is a microphone should be on the left-hand corner, the bottom of your screen, so you can mute and unmute yourself, and also a camera button. If you do feel comfortable, I would love to see your faces and just be able to see you guys, vibes off you, you know, and have that bit more of connection. I'm not going to make you, but if you're okay with that, that would be really lovely. And just to get us started, really, we just want to know a bit about you guys, because there's so many of you and we're kind of short for time. I'm going to ask you to put in the chat box, if that's okay, just your name, your role, and I'll write this in the chat as well, so actually we can remember. So your name, your role, why you're here, and if there's ever been a time where you wish you'd taken a stand. And you don't have to go into detail, you can just say yes or no if you'd like. I just want to gauge that. So yeah, if everybody could put that in the chat box button is just, should be at the bottom of your screen in the middle. And yeah, as Asif said, today's session, we're going to speak a little bit about kind of our own journeys in the industry and maybe challenges that we've faced, and how we think accountability can really help us move forward. But then also, you know, we're really big on collaboration. We can't do this alone. So I think it's important that we all have a chance to speak and share and kind of empower one another to find a way forward in navigating accountability. Also finding out whether, you know, where the best practice is already, is there ideas we can adopt, and looking at the kind of barriers that exist when looking at accountability. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, Elizabeth?
Yes, if there's one thing, please, we definitely will be getting quite chatty today, so please feel free, first of all, feel free to unmute yourselves and to just be present with us today too. This is absolutely a safe space, so we just want to open with a sense of warmness, a sense of curiosity, questions. Nothing is ever a silly question. We really want you to be open with us, so please feel that invitation that this is a safe space, and we really want to go on a journey with you, and hopefully we can end with some things that we can all do in order to, one, not only hold ourselves accountable, but two, make sure that we're in our day-to-day lived experiences, we're leaning towards making the world a better place, because actually that's why we're really here today. So yes, thank you so much. The chat function is now popping off. Well, it started to anyway. Please speak to us. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you.
I like that Foo Fighter is always taking a stand. Enjoy that.
Amazing. So we've got Kate, a uni lecturer here to learn. There's been times where we should take a stand. Bad internet, no worries.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Emma, Julia. Okay, so there's a lot of people that wish they had taken a stand. Bit of a theme. Oh, interesting. Someone wish they were more accountable when calling out a family member. I think that's, yeah, can relate.
Also, it would be good to know what parts of the UK you're representing today as well.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, guys. If you are still writing, that's fine. We'll come back to some of those things. I think what's really interesting about people wishing they'd made a stand, I think we all feel that. I definitely do, especially my kind of, I don't know, times when I wasn't as confident or as empowered as I am now to use my voice. And I think working towards using accountability in a positive way can help us kind of dissolve those moments of guilt. Because if we are holding ourselves accountable, it means that we're prepared to make that stand and to move forward in a different way. So yeah, I hope that people can kind of resonate with that. So we're gonna do a bit more of a detailed introduction of ourselves now. So I'll go first. So my name is Adaya Henry. I am an artist. I'm a poet, writer, actor, singer, facilitator, newly filmmaker, and I also work as community lead at Yard Art House. So I'm based in the Midlands, and Yard Art House is a kind of a physical representation of the work that Maya Group have been doing. And Maya is a social justice and arts organisation, and we've created a space that artists can use the facilities for free. We have open programmes, and it's really about finding the need of artists in the city, as well as linking up other organisations to one another. The founders are Mara Spence and Amber Caldwell. I am kind of forever grateful for offering me the job and seeing the value in me as an artist. Something that I feel this industry fails to recognise a lot of the time is the artist as a whole. And I think in order for us to move forward and for us to thrive, that's something that fundamentally has to change. And what I mean by that is I've had to work a lot of unconventional jobs to sustain myself. And a lot of those jobs on a CV wouldn't really get me a look in for roles such as artistic director, CEO, or even my current role now at Yard. And for context, you know, I've worked as an elf. 2 years on a trot, I was cast as a horse, pun intended. And, you know, a few weeks ago, I was cycling around Coventry on a tricycle, reading poems to the public. All these things on paper aren't exactly, I don't know, they're not roles that you think, oh yeah, cultural leader material. But actually, as artists, we have so much more to offer than just our creative practice. And I think if the creative industry started thinking about accountability with a bit more innovation and bravery, then you'd recognise the value in artists and how we can really go on this journey together. So my ambition when coming into this industry was to, I guess, just perform and do what I love. And I have done that now with many organisations across the country and theatres, development programmes after development programmes, some more thought out than others. But something that always strikes me is that, you know, I've met artists and practitioners that have made me fall in love with this industry and open my eyes and heart to so many different things. But there's the leaders in this sector have no idea that some of those people exist, which is shocking because I know that there's no one more tenacious than an artist. So I kind of want everyone here, if it relates to you, if you are kind of one of the leaders within our sector, to think about how are you connecting with the people that you say you want to reach, and you know, in terms of accountability, can you share those action plans publicly? Is there a plan? Is there a real intention in connecting to artists that you're not currently connected to? And I think if that plan kind of looks like, well, let's get in touch with this organisation to reach those artists, then I would argue that from an outside perspective doesn't look like the care and intention is there in the work that we're all trying to fulfill. Because realistically, artists are very easy to reach. I think we're always putting ourselves out there. There is no one more well connected than an artist. I think we seek people, we seek stories, we seek change, and we make it. We are imperfect beings, and we're brave enough to talk about it, to make art about it, and, you know, to hold up a mirror to society and say, look, you're not alone, we're broken too. And I think that bravery has to be at a different level when I'm talking about being a part of the Black creative workforce. You know, I sometimes have to be brave just to turn up to the first day of a job, knowing that I'll probably be the only one in the space that looks like me, or have to be worried about certain topics coming up because I'll be forced to defend my own being. Often the only one whose costume doesn't fit because my hip to waist ratio wasn't taken into account, and the only one that will be asked to do their own hair and makeup, or even the only one who will be asked if they're in the right place when they enter the building. I think when things like that, when instances like that occur to artists from a global majority or the Black creative workforce, when those things happen in a very space that they've yearned to be in, this sector risks losing them. It risks losing the imaginations of that artist, the bravery, the boldness, and the beauty of that artist, which I think is a real shame. And I hope that that's what we all want to work towards not happening. I think to achieve that, we need leadership that is brave enough to recognise and interrogate how their own practices and environments are currently harmful towards a part of the creative workforce. And accountability comes hand in hand to that. We need leadership to invest and connect with places like Yard and organisations that are already doing the work. And we need leadership that wants to champion and support us with intention and care, that are willing to take a risk in order to keep us and radically fight for us as a whole, recognising what we bring to the table simply by existing as artists. So yeah, that's just a bit of intro to me. I feel like I'm speaking for a very long time there. I hope that wasn't too much. Elizabeth, I'm gonna pass over to you.
So thank you, Adaya. I think you had some really sort of amazing points there, especially when asking questions to, you know, how leadership can take a step into learning and exploring and understanding more about the artists that make their cities move. So, you know, I just want to pay homage to you. We share similar stories, but we don't at the same time. So I think I'm going to delve into everything, really, but I won't take too much time. I might take a bit of time, but let's go with it together. So first of all, it's an honor to share space and time with you all this early evening. Thank you so much for being here and choosing to be present in this conversation. Asif really kindly introduced, said a very long introduction for me, but before all of those things, I would say, or I was a young person just passionate about being a creative working in this industry, and I'm a firm believer in equity, in fairness, and in providing opportunities that empowers people with lived experiences to thrive. That's where we're going. We want people to thrive within the workforce and beyond. We want our audiences to thrive. We want our communities to thrive. And ultimately, we want ourselves to thrive. And accountability is a step in the right direction in order to get to that outcome, which is thriving. The one thing that I wanted to just say is both Adaya and myself really believe that now is the time to frame this conversation around thriving, because for too long, not enough has been done when it comes to being held accountable. And I fundamentally believe that we don't know why, why we're being held accountable and where we're going. So before I begin, I just want to invite you to think about 3 questions, okay? The first question is, what does the future of the culture sector look and feel like? So in 100 years' time, do we want to still have these conversations about how we can hold ourselves accountable in order to make the culture sector a better place? What are we missing? What could the culture sector look and feel like? How do we innovate? Is the second question. You know, a lot of people say, okay, there's not enough funding and there's not enough opportunities for us to, you know, to move forward and to create new roles and new opportunities for people to come through the next generation. Okay, then maybe we need to reframe our thinking and think about how we can innovate and how we can hold ourselves accountable to that innovation. We do know that we had COP26 maybe a couple of days ago. You know, what cultural green producer roles that are, you know, representative of people with lived experiences? What roles could we take or be a part of or create? What roles could be created if we start thinking about innovation at the forefront of accountability? So I just wanted to just delve at that, to ask you that question there. So how do we innovate? And also, do you really believe that we / you and us, we're doing enough to connect with the communities that we aim to serve? You know, we're a part of an ecosystem. When you leave your house, do you feel as if you know potentially the 10-year-old who's in their room thinking about writing poetry, who might not necessarily have connected with your venue as of yet? Or do you believe that you're doing enough to connect with the family who might be in Birmingham, it might be in Handsworth, or it might be in Smethwick, for example, who are writing lyrics about the issues that are going on in their community, but have nowhere to go when it comes to actually showing that to their, communicating their issues to an audience? You know, like, are you doing enough to connect with the communities that you aim to serve? We are an ecosystem. So if you're in the position to create opportunities, are you creating opportunities that really enable talent to thrive? That was 4 questions, my apologies. But now I'm going to delve into my journey in and out of the culture sector temporarily. So I moved to Birmingham in 2013 for university. I quickly realized that I was very quickly realized that I was the only Black female on my course. That is surprising because I was in Birmingham. And I was shocked because I wanted to explore all of the things that this city had to offer. I met 2 amazing women, and against the odds, they enabled me and empowered me to think beyond the realms of my own experience and really imagine a future that enabled everyone to thrive. Before I knew it, I was wholeheartedly embraced and immersed into the creative communities of civic change makers. So, for example, Maya, led by Amara Spence at the time, he was creating poetry events. In fact, I did my first ever gig as a musician at a Maya event in 2013. I went to Poetry Jam led by Beat Freaks. Again, I met my creative family there, where I was enabled to, you know, just write and create spaces and really unleash my passion for arts and culture outside of the university where I studied drama and theatre arts. So I just wanted to just bring that into to give you some context into what I'm talking about in terms of the civic and cultural change makers that were in the city. So for 7 years, I was then working between the culture sector and the youth sector, and I really was put into a privilege where I could sort of sharpen and harness my skills to grow and nurture communities within my work. And what I mean by nurture is care. And every single day I would be held accountable by the communities that I aim to serve, because I wanted to make opportunities for the people, for the artists, for the and the change makers to have their voices heard and to really realize their creative ambitions. So again, as a young person at the time, I often felt frustrated that my friends felt as if they had to move outside of the West Midlands to establish their sustainable and long-term creative ambitions due to feeling left out and locked out of opportunities. And I want to just again articulate what I mean by that. So whilst I was studying at a very amazing, whilst I was studying at a really prestigious university, I was given the privilege of access. So I had access to networks that my friends in Birmingham that went to these poetry events, for example, did not. And I realized, okay, why is it that when I'm at this university, I can meet these amazing leaders who are transforming the city, whereas, you know, I'm going to events and people and my friends are saying, okay, I can't sustain my career here, I have to leave. I really wanted to bridge the gap and create those connections. So after having 7 or so really beautiful years of working for that amazing organization, I was doing that whilst I was studying, just if you guys haven't made that connection just yet. I left and then I worked for a major cultural festival. And then last year, during the height of the pandemic, the vast majority of the world witnessed an injustice, and that was the murder of George Floyd. And that really shook the fabric of my identity. And it forced me to look inwards and to question everything again. This compelled me to think about the world in a completely new light. I remember the need to do things for ourselves, because there was never really an accurate representation of our stories. Outside of my university and outside of university, the reason why I built my experience as well was because I put on festivals with my friends that celebrated Black British culture and the diaspora. We put on workshops talking about how we loved our hair, and we learnt from each other about our identity, and we found safe spaces to mourn after experiencing injustice. Now, going back to my experience at university, I remember studying for hours, trying to find a play that resonated with stories, trying to find a play with stories that resonated with my lived experiences. So then I wrote my own. It was called Exhale. And I realized that actually, why is it that I always have to write my own stories or put my own events on in order for people to recognize that, you know, I exist, or we exist. And that was part of the reason why I had a fuel really to demand change, to build a better future, not just for myself actually, but for my generation and the generation before me, who had done the hard work, but also the generation after. I had a feeling in my gut to do something, anything that could bridge the gap between leaderships and the community that we aim to serve. And so, you know, I took action for 2 reasons: to serve the community who supported me, to make room for a new dialogue based on trust, authenticity, and transparency, and so that we could actually rebuild. And that was the birth of More Than a Moment, action with and for the Black creative workforce. Whilst I was joining a major cultural organisation, I was put in a really strange opportunity to sit on the board for 2 massive organisations, and I was on the board for Culture Central. And I wrote a letter, essentially, and I asked Erica Love, the director of Culture Central, you know, what can we do to actually show that this sector really cares about the Black creative workforce and the communities that we aim to serve? And actually, the sector did something. We created a working group, which was a microcosm of the culture sector. So this is the working group comprised of leadership, as well as artists that were working within the space, as well as individuals, to really come together and to create, or shall I say, co-create a 5-part pledge. So in phase 1, we just did a really important thing, which was listening. We took a moment to pause, to listen, and to truly, you know, hear the lived experiences that were happening within the sector, and to hold space for Black artists and Black creators and the professionals whose voices were seldom heard. In phase 2, we brought together the Black creative workforce and leadership across the culture sector to really reimagine how we could try to make a difference. And that phase 2 section was really about how we could connect connect and really bridge that gap between the disconnect. And then in phase 3, we came together to move forward. And this was where we crafted the pledge, and we co-designed the fundamental changes that needed to happen in order to make sure that this was long-term, this was radical, and this was permanent within the West Midlands. And then in phase 4, from taking feedback from both leadership and the Black creative workforce, we launched the pledge. We listened, we researched, we co-created, we co-designed, we communicated, we showcased the pledge. So that was a year ago. Now 1 year on, what happened? So 1 year on, what happened? Around £852,000 has gone directly to the Black creative workforce in terms of the action that was taken in the short term. In the medium term, 76% of organisations who signed up to the pledge 75% of organisations who signed up to the pledge have reviewed senior roles and enabled processes that continually drive fresh, new talent and thinking and vision. 1 more statistic and then I'm done talking. 79% of organisations have also delved into wellbeing and transparency. So these are all of the organisations that have signed up to the pledge, where they have said, okay, we're going to focus on being transparent and making real fundamental change with and for the Black creative workforce. And we've also created an accountability model where we can continue doing this work. I will stop talking now, but I just want to say that when we come together and we focus on a specific challenge and really look at the future and the potential of what could happen and what possibilities we can create, we can really make change. So I'm gonna stop waffling on now, but I just want to say that it is possible to make change as long as we can come together and just focus and do it together.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Somebody mentioned in the chat, which I completely agree with. Someone said the question isn't whether we are doing enough, but are we being effective? And I think that's really important. I think I touched on it in my introduction. It is about moving with intention, always, and knowing, you know, not just why you're doing something, but what you want those outcomes to be as well. At Yard, we do that with everything we plan, you know, whether that's a really big thing or a scratch night that we're putting on. We have to know why we're doing it. And it can't just be because, oh, if we don't, Twitter's going to come for us. Like, there has to be a real will there and a real want. And I think even no matter how big your organization is, you all need to be on the same page and kind of, you know, whatever working document you're using or whiteboard, have those intentions there all the time. So you can always go back to that, you know, you can never fall off track, because it can be a lot when you're working on something quite big, or especially when we're moving towards a change, it's very easy to go off the rails. So yeah, I think in order to be effective, we need to know why we're doing it. Elizabeth, do you want to carry on into the next section? You're on mute.
2021, we're in 2021 and I still don't know how to unmute myself on Zoom after a whole global pandemic. Okay, so the next section is really doing an introduction into accountability. So we believe that accountability is the key to us thriving as individuals, as organizations, to build an inclusive and sustainable cultural industry. We know that by organizations holding anti-racism at the forefront of decision making, then we are one step closer to building a future that literally works for everyone. I know that Adaya's got some really interesting examples of how she's actually been held accountable by the Arts Council, for example. But do you want to talk about your example of being held accountable?
So recently I was audited by the Arts Council, which was very scary, and especially the nature of the funding. It was an emergency grant, so I wasn't expecting it. But what's more interesting is when I've told people that, people have been like, what? Like, in all my years, in my 20 years of putting in funding applications, I have never, and this is people from organizations, so I found it really interesting that me as an artist who had a grant, as an emergency grant in the middle of a pandemic, had to prove what I did with that money, yet organizations are going for years and years without that same accountability. And, you know, it was fine that they audited me. I used the money as I mean, it could be because I'm Black. I don't know. It makes one wonder. I should have just replied that in the email. Is it because I'm Black? But no, they, and you know, it was fine because I'd used the money properly, and it helped me create work and stay visible during that time. But it did occur to me that actually, as you know, it was a bit of a pain. It was good that happened. And it made me feel good about the fact that I had done this correctly and it had served the purpose it was meant to serve. And if organizations, if we know that that's never coming, if we know that these questions of accountability are never coming, actually, people will misuse those opportunities and misuse their power, as Lakshmi mentioned earlier, or Asif, sorry, someone from the BRAP team. It is easy to misuse if you know no one's really going to come and check on it. And I have heard stories of people kind of misusing Arts Council money with confidence, actually, and that isn't right. And we're kind of at a risk of that culture growing if we don't kind of bring that to a head.
I just wanted to touch on that, actually. In terms of being held accountable and the organisation that was funding you asking you questions, you know, about where you spent that money and what you did with it. I just want to take a moment to zoom out of the culture sector and land into the tech industry, because that's actually where I work now. And they are very good at holding organisations accountable by the data on a weekly basis. And it not only enables us to try and ensure that the work we're doing what we say we're doing by evidencing that through data, but also providing that qualitative evidence in terms of, you know, hearing directly from our beneficiaries about the program. It enables us to have much more of a transparent and open and authentic relationship with not only the communities, because we know that, you know, our outcome is to enable them to thrive, but actually with our funders too, who are asking these questions, who want to know, so that actually when things aren't necessarily working, we can change it to make it much better. And I think that's actually something that the culture sector could definitely adopt more in terms of having a bit more pressure from our funders, but to ensure that actually the spend or the money is going exactly where we say it's going, and it's actually adding more value and for the communities that we aim to benefit to, or audiences too. But yeah, no, I'll throw that back to you back to you, Adaya.
Thank you. So just kind of individually now, if you've got a bit of paper and a pen near you, if not, don't worry, you can just open a document on your screen or on your phone notes. We're not going to look at it, but just somewhere where you can write. We'd just like to ask everybody to write down, as an individual, what challenges or main challenge do you face when it comes to being held accountable? And that can be, if you're part of the sector, in relation to your role, or it could be if you're kind of here as an audience member, as an artist. It could be on a personal level, or something that you think is a barrier for organisations. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that.
So this could be anything from, you know, fear to judgment, or anything. We ran sector learning sessions throughout the year with organisations through the More Than a Moment process over the last 12 months. And actually, one of the big things that came out from a lot of organisations was, you know, it was the fear of saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing or not doing anything at all. And that was actually stopping people from making any action when it came to being held accountable. So I just really invite you to just be honest and be like, okay, you know, what is the one thing that stops me from that challenges me or prevents me to being held accountable, you know? So just in the chat function, or if you want to unmute yourselves and speak to us, that would be lovely. What are the key barriers to holding yourself or to accountability within your organization? So if you're an artist and if you're not part of an organization, what are the barriers you face when keeping an organization accountable? So if you're part of an organization, what are the key barriers to accountability within your organization? And if you are an artist or not part of an organization, what are the barriers you face from keeping an organization accountable? When you've got your responses, please type in the chat function.
Or equally, if you'd like to speak to us, please feel free to do that as well.
I feel like Lynn, you're like, oh, I want to say something.
Oh yeah.
Well, I was wondering if I dared, so you saw that right. So I'm on the board of a theatre company in Bradford, and we've been saying for a long time that we need particularly to have more South Asian people involved in the company. So we have explicitly said that's something we want to do for many years, but we haven't succeeded yet. And I think, and it's really interesting what you're saying about accountability, because I think we haven't, until very recently, we haven't really said that's something we want to do, and maybe even broken it into steps and said, you know, by such and such a time we'll have done such and such a thing. But myself and Emma, who's also in this meeting, we're just hopefully about to become co-chairs of the board, and we've said that we're going to do that for 2 years, and our aim is for the company, and in particular the board, to be more diverse at the end of that 2 years. So you know, and I'm thinking it's important that we do that and review it regularly, you know, and if we don't manage to, I mean, hopefully we will succeed, but if we don't, then we need to be able to discuss that and work out what went wrong and do something different.
I think, you know, that's a really great way of moving forward, to be honest. I think that having diversity and inclusion, or this agenda specifically at your board meetings, enables, you know, the full team to continue to talk about it, and also to create an action plan of, okay, you know, we've spoken about it now, we want it to happen, the will is there, but actually who is responsible for doing that? So I think as chair / co-chair, you know, we've already got a takeaway. It's on the agenda, and it's something we're committed to doing. And I think if it's barriers to or challenges with connecting with the South Asian community, you know, we could do, is there anyone within your organization whose role is responsible to go out there and speak to or engage with artists that represent those lived experiences? Because how can we then start bringing, you know, you and potentially people within the team together, so that actually we've got a cross-functional way of working now, as opposed to the board wants this and this is what's happening on the ground. We need to start, you know, opening more channels of dialogue to ensure that the action plans that we're creating is tangible. Does that make sense? I don't know if I've
yeah. It does, thank you.
Yeah, and just to jump on, I think the idea of, you know, refreshing boards like those 2 years, and I've heard a lot of organizations doing that now, kind of putting on caps on how long people can be there. It is I think it's important, because I think before even the last year, some boards have literally been sitting there for 30 years, you know, enjoying their Christmas parties and whatnot, but not really wanting to move from that seat and welcome other people in. So I think that's a really positive thing, and it kind of takes a sacrifice, and you know, sometimes that is needed. And in terms of, again, connecting with the people that you want to connect with, I think organizations forget that you have to go to them as well. So, you know, people, if your organization is not very diverse, me as someone who's not from a white community, if the whole company was just white, I would feel uncomfortable about approaching that organization. However, if that organization I could see in my spaces, in an event that was very diverse, and they're making the effort to come and see what are the arts out there, rather than just waiting for us to go to their events, I think that's a really good way of connecting. You know, it's very easy to become siloed in this industry, but there's so much going on out there. So I think, you know, have a look at what South Asian artists are doing in Bradford, because I guarantee you there'll be nights, there'll be events where they are taking up space, and they won't be, you know, there might be some spaces specifically for that group of people that actually, if they're putting on public performances, shows, anybody can go to them. It's just that a lot of people won't, but don't feel like you can't. Art is to be shared with everyone, and you know, you probably enjoy it as well.
And how warm does it feel to get an invitation, or to say, look, hi, I'm from this organization and I'm excited about you. Let's connect. How lovely does it feel to get that invitation to connect, to do things together? So always remember that, like, maybe you're not actually stepping on anyone's toes when it comes to reaching out. You know, maybe that person has wanted an opportunity and you've just landed in their Twitter DMs, if you have it. Okay, so we've got here, as an artist, gaslighting is the main barrier, and I think that's actually a really amazing point that you've put out there, Foo Fighter. Actually, during the radical listening research, we had lots of examples of the Black creative workforce articulating specifically what they meant by, you know, being gaslit within an organization, and that's people not necessarily being aware of microaggressions that have been ingrained into the fabric of culture, actually. And people might not necessarily recognize that they're gaslighting, but we need to, and what I mean by people might not necessarily recognizing that they are exposed, that people might not necessarily recognizing that they are gaslighting an individual. Training needs to be put in place to understand, you know, understanding cultural barriers, because actually people are socialized to work or to work and live within certain bubbles, and actually the way language is used can really negatively impact an artist, which then leads them not to be heard when it comes to raising their voices or concerns, or trying to hold an organization accountable. And so that's kind of why people are really pushing for, you know, anti-racism training, microaggression training, because, you know, the person who's gaslighting might not even understand that they are, or might behave in the way where they believe that they're not, even though actually, based on you know, the Black creative workforce or another person's lived experience, that is the prime example of gaslighting behavior. And so, you know, that training needs to be put in place so people recognize, and if they continue to gaslight, that's when you need to put a real plan in place on what to do next, because, you know, it's in 2021, it's inexcusable for people to be operating in that fashion. So, you know, if gaslighting is a challenge within that organization, you know, what types of, again, looking at connection, you know, are there organizations or institutions that you could potentially connect with, or safe spaces that you can go to create almost like an anonymous, sort of insight or research report, which then sort of gives you as an individual evidence to showcase that actually that behavior is systemic too. So from an organizational level, you know, training needs to be put in place as well, but as an artist and as an individual, you know, how can you collect some lived experiences that gives you enough evidence to really sort of bolster you know, your case, and then move forward with that? Because when I mentioned earlier, data is something that is almost you can't really challenge that. I think that might be a bit helpful for you, Foo Fighter. And again, if you wanted to touch on that or connect with More Than a Moment, we can support you in that, because that's something that we helped quite a few help push forward within the West Midlands specifically. Adaya.
There's two things I want to pick up in here, what people have said. Oh, actually, I think they both came. Oh no. So one's from Emma Gee. who said language and terminology, which is, I think it's a really interesting barrier to have in terms of when we're looking at accountability. So I'm going to kind of throw it out to the group, but Emma, if you're happy to speak, I guess when we say language, is it not knowing how to bring something up? Or is it not having the language to be accountable because there's a lack of understanding on what's gone wrong? If that makes sense.
Yes, it does. I think probably both and many other things. I think that tongue-tiedness of am I using the right terminology? Am I being correct in this? I work alongside Lynn, and Mind the Gap is focused on work with and by performers with learning disabilities. And we're very aware that if you don't get the terminology correct around disability, particularly, you've got a problem on your hands, because immediately you're going to be perceived as outdated, outmoded. But we were also discussing that if you pick up on new terminologies too soon, you cause confusion. So as language will never stay still either. You can't pin it down today and think you've got it sussed. You can't. But you've got to tread that fine line. But and also that thing about, well, how do those people with lived experience want to describe and define themselves? So it's a delicate thing. It's a subtle thing.
Yeah, it is. And I guess just being connected to those people and having the ability to ask, actually, sometimes I think we can get a bit caught up in, oh gosh, what do I, there's so many different ways people identify, whether that be, physical, whether we're looking at mental illness, there's so many different race, gender, there's so many different ways people want to be identified. I generally just ask, in most cases that's the easiest way. But also I think if you're coming from a good place and a right intention, people will be forgiving. Language is evolving, and it isn't just going to click straight away. So as long as you're willing to try and try again and try again and try again, and your intention is right, it will eventually just be embedded into us all. But thank you for sharing that, Emma. I just wanted to pick up on something Degna said about openness and transparency in relationships between organisations is a barrier. Now, I think that is massive, and Elizabeth mentioned this ecosystem thing earlier. As organisations, as individuals, we have to be working together. We can't all do it alone. And actually, if you're harbouring a really good bit of practice, you should be sharing that with everyone. It's all our duties. We're all in this together. When we look at it as an industry, as people that want to make the change. And equally, if you're having problems, if you need someone to help you with that accountability or moving your organisation to a place, Lynn and Emma up in Bradford, are there organisations that you think, oh, they're really connected with the people we want to be? Have you arranged a tea with them? Have you had like some sort of community link up? What things are happening that actually we can probably tap into? And there will be an exchange of value there, because you guys might be doing something really great that organisation just hasn't quite got to yet. So yeah, I just wanted to say that, but I think organisations absolutely should be connected. So we're just going to move on now. So we've spoke about a few of the challenges, and please, if you've got any more you want to add in the chat box, please do, because we don't want to ignore that it can be difficult. However, we're here to focus on the things that we can do now, because I think there's probably more than we realise. So me and Elizabeth have spoken about this quite a lot in terms of the kind of accountability we want to see, and things that could be happening. So something Lynn mentioned earlier is the Board of Trustees and how they can help us remain accountable. So does anybody have any kind of ideas or has seen another organisation using their board in a really good way to stay accountable? Please put it in the chat or just put your hands up. So the question is, how can we use our board of trustees to keep us accountable? Because they're there for the company. Adrian, hello.
Hello, and thank you so much for all the sharing and the ideas so far. It's really, really valuable. And I'm going to share something that's actually not to do with the roles that I put into the chats, but separate to those. I'm chair of a theatre company called Third Angel, based in Sheffield. And one of the things that we have done is we've set up an equity working group at the company, which involves trustees, but also company members, precisely because we have been addressing some of the issues that Lynn and Emma have been talking about in terms of trying to, the company, I should say, to start with, is an all-white company. The creative team are all white, the trustees are all white. We understood that was something that we needed to change, we wanted to change. We have not made the progress we have wanted to as fast as we want to, but we have put in place actions to move that forward. We've just made contact with a consultancy that's going to work with us to take us through a series of steps that will help shape the work that we do in the future. But we have found that that working group of the creative team and the trustees has ensured that the whole organisation is committed to this work, and that it forms part of all of the company's thinking, both about its creative work, but for the trustees about how we think about governance, how we think about how we hold ourselves to account and are accountable both to our stakeholders, but arguably more importantly, the communities we want to work with and serve. So that has proved really, it's helped us focus on something that we were struggling to deal with, and we believe we're starting to make progress. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you, Adrian. I would just challenge you to have a think about how you will document that process and how you will measure that benchmark of where you started and where you got to, and probably in more ways than one as well. Elizabeth, were you gonna?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that in terms of giving you some challenges. Also, who do you know by what percentage you want to sort of have much more of a reflective workforce? Because it would be great to actually, not just have the current staff that are, involved in this conversation, but actually the communities that you want to see as well, because there could be artists who have really some invaluable experience or ideas that they can support you with. And, it's really about broadening your pool of who is in the room having those conversations, especially as we want to ensure that, every voice is heard at this critical moment, which is, we don't know what we're doing right now. We know we need to change. Who's not here? Let's have their voice centered in this work as well. And maybe there needs to be sort of a budget aligned to that, if that's possible, to ensure that happens. Otherwise, I guess with consultants, though they are amazing, even there's still voices in that room at that critical point that still aren't involved in those conversations. And so it's really about ensuring who's in that room right now when we're thinking about this, the changes that we want to make too.
We've had some big statements in the chat box. If I respond to Kerry, could you maybe respond to Joy, because I think they're really important points. So Kerry mentioned about data being used, and I completely agree. There's a theatre company I've worked with a lot, and every time I work with them, they get me to fill out that data form on who I am, my identity, and every time they send it me, I think, oh gosh, I forgot. If you just hired me because you said in your funding that, and it is impersonal, and it is an annoying thing that you've picked up there. I completely agree. But in terms of data, and I think when Elizabeth mentioned it as well, we're a creative sector. it's an age-old thing of us having to prove that what we do works. I do a lot of work in the community and based on social change. And, you know, how do you explain that actually us working with this group of 70-year-olds has probably, well, it has definitely added value to their lives, you know, in this really important time. It's really hard to put that down on paper. But if we think creatively, there's different forms of data we can use, whether that be, you know, regular groups of people meeting, you know, that's a form of data, whether that be, you know, it could even be podcasts. It could be commissioning work to be made based off an experience of working with your company. There's so many different ways that we can find out, other than just like, okay, tick this box. How many organizations did you work with this year? I haven't got all the answers and my mind just went blank, but I think, you know, and it, as I said, it's not down to one person. If we all had a discussion, if we had an hour now to delve into different ways we could use data, I have no doubt we'd come up with some really cool and innovative ideas that aren't the kind of go-to things. Elizabeth?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that, and when you know, capturing data, you can humanize that process. You mentioned it earlier, we're a creative industry, you know, and it's consultation, it's that co-design process, it's workshops, it's inviting people to have a conversation about that specific challenge that you're facing and bringing them in. And then you could, if you wanted to put a Google form at the end of the process, that's totally fine, but it's mainly about how are you embedding the thoughts, views, ideas, and lived experiences within your organization, and then how are you opening that dialogue. And within the tech industry, they're very, you know, they're very bullish in how they capture and monitor that data, but ultimately it's down to us to have those types of conversations and evidence that we're embedding that into the work. And that's not by box ticking, it's by saying, it's by looking at, you know, the individual and having their input within the workforce and saying that, you know, Sandra said this, we did it. We've publicly showcased this. Sandra's now on our board. That's what we mean by, you know, looking at how we can track our progress by using data and really zeroing in on where that happened and when it happened and how you could do it to ensure that we're measuring the change, really. And sometimes it's about artists feeling that change. You know, with qualitative data, it can be a bit airy-fairy, but actually, how do artists feel when they enter our space? Does that feel space? You can't quantify that in numbers. It's more how it's about you seeing it within your venues, you know, who is now entering those spaces, and how long are they staying in those spaces for, and who's having conversations. Like, do you know, for example, the creative workforce or the creatives that make your organizations move, as I asked earlier. And it's about you understanding that now you've got those connections, and where that came from. Sorry, Adaya.
No, it's fine. I just wanted to flag up an example that we've got in Birmingham. And so the Birmingham Hippodrome held a series of open conversations last year. And I facilitated one of those conversations where they kind of heard, they listened to artists, and, you know, they felt there was a real need from artists in the city. And from those conversations, they've now created something called an artist pass at the Hippodrome, so we can sign up for that. We can use space for free. We have discounts in the cafe. There's plans to just make a kind of drop-in rehearsal space. And, you know, I know some people are probably thinking, and I know other organizations have said this, but, you know, they're a big organization, they've got the funding and da-da-da-da. But, you know, on a smaller scale, I've been running funding workshops for artists at Yard, and we've had cultural leaders volunteer their time to come and share with those artists. And, you know, we weren't paying them. There was not really any kind of big credit for them. They didn't really get anything out of that other than offering their own expertise. They didn't have to plan anything. They just had to be present and willing to share. And so, you know, for me, both of those examples are the same. That's you hearing what we need and actually offering it. So sometimes it's not about thinking, oh, I can't do this because I'm a small organization, or we're placed in this part of the country. Actually putting that energy into what we can do. Sorry, Elizabeth.
No, I think that's a prime example. I was going to say the Hippodrome as well. So
Yeah.
you put the nail on the head there too. It's an organization that knew that they had a challenge and were transparent enough and open enough to be like, okay, guys, how can we make our venue better and evidence what they did exactly, and that has led to the artist pass, which people are really proud of. And that's again looking at, you know, how can we innovate, how can we do things better, why are we holding ourselves accountable, and who is holding ourselves accountable? Like, do we know exactly who's going to, you know, pull our legs when we're doing something wrong? Okay, what is our relationship with that individual? We shouldn't be afraid to have those conversations because we know we're working together to make the sector a much more fair, inclusive and equitable space too. And if you're an individual that needs help on how to make that change, or an artist that needs help on how to make that process happen, I will drop my email at the end, because it requires a lot more time to invest in how we'll do that. So yes, right. Now we're going to go into what can you do moving forward. So I would like you to, I'm just going to invite you to think about sort of 3 actions that you can take. We do need the artist pass, or just come to Birmingham. We'll take you now. So Birmingham, so we'll come to Birmingham. This will be your safe space now, and then we can bring that back into your city. But yes, we really want to delve into this conversation in a bit more detail. We've only got a few minutes left of this, but what actions, tangible, practical actions, can we take moving forward to ensure that we are holding ourselves accountable? What can you do in the short term? What can you do in the medium term? And what can you do in the long term? So maybe we could delve into a breakout room, or just post in the chat function of what actions or what steps we can practically take today in order to make some tangible change and hold ourselves accountable. And this could be us choosing somebody who's going to check up on us in about 3 months' time, or grabbing an email to say, okay, what did you do on that? Because you publicly said in this space that we're going to do something according to that issue. So yeah, I'd like you to think about 3 actions that you're going to take in the short term and in the medium and in the long term to make some real tangible change.
Yeah, I think we'll leave breakout rooms because of the time.
We won't do a breakout room.
But especially on that piece of paper that at the beginning you wrote something that was a barrier, if you go to that same piece of paper and write down your kind of goals, and one thing that you can actually do today, even, you know, because there will be something. So we just have a few minutes, and then we'll get a couple of people to share back if you're happy to, before taking some questions.
But this time we're going to ask you to post your actions in the chat function. So this is a public conversation now. We are going to hold ourselves accountable. And if you're happy to share, we invite you to do so. Love that, Foo Fighter. I can't wait to meet you, by the way.
Okay, so if you can start sending them through on the chat for us. Even if you've just got one so far, if you just pop that in. And something Joy said earlier that I wanted to pick up on was about what are people prepared to be accountable for? And they mentioned that being held accountable for racism is a very uncomfortable experience. And we've seen that numerous times. Often people are more outraged about being called a racist than the actual racism. And so I think that's something everybody should be prepared to be held accountable for, whether we meant it, whether we intended it. Actually, if somebody from a lived experience is telling you that you've made them feel uncomfortable, you have to be prepared to listen to that. And that goes for everybody in this space, myself included.
And just to kind of add to that, I would see it as an invitation for a dialogue. Whenever you have a pushback, this is an invitation to, okay, something's gone wrong here. Let's have a conversation. And I think a lot of the time there's that instant barrier, that instant blockage of no, I haven't done anything that has caused offense to anyone or haven't been racist. Maybe just reframe your thinking and think, who needs to talk? We need to have a conversation here, or let's have a conversation. What's gone wrong? Because there's been a breakdown here in communication. Take a responsibility for an action that may have caused damage to that individual and try and move forward. Because whenever an incident like that happens, we've stopped, we've in the bus of innovation and change, we've stopped the bus is broken down because we're trying to, and we need to fix it ultimately. So Emma G, having a chat with Adrian, we want to see a date in the diary. We want to get that date in the diary. We're going to lock it in, okay? Lynn, you're planning to hold an open meeting for new trustees, but it will be better to go out and visit groups. Yes, meet some of your artists that like Adaya talk about the leaders that you don't know. Fantastic. When are you doing that? When are you doing that, Lynn?
Before Christmas.
Before Christmas, okay. Lynn, I'm going to find you on Twitter if you have it.
Okay, that's great. Identify someone you trust that I can ask to hold me personally accountable.
Accountability buddy.
Yeah, but make sure they're not, you're not too close, so that they don't want to, they're not viewing you through rose-tinted glasses. Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate the thumbs up. Increase 1% challenge commitment and getting data in the diary to talk to Emma. Great. Okay, we see the emails going.
Amazing.
So does anybody feel like they'd be comfortable with their organisations publicly sharing data, publicly sharing their journey, or is that scary because people would be able to hold you accountable?
Lucy, I can see your head bubbling there, so we invite you to talk to us.
I was just agreeing, I think that is a great idea to have just that tracking of the journey and accountability. Absolutely, I think that's a really good idea. I hadn't written down my long-term aim yet, but maybe that could be it.
Absolutely. And also, it's a sense of achievement. We mentioned at the beginning that accountability will help us all thrive and all grow, because ultimately it's going to give the people that are not in the best position, it's going to put them in a better position, and it's going to put the leaders in a better position because they're going to be working towards the things that they want to do in a more positive way and in a way that it's actually working.
100%. You know, there's nothing more beautiful than saying, okay, on the 18th of November, I tweeted something this, and then 1 year on saying, oh yeah, we actually did the thing that we said we would do. We've moved forward, even if it's something small. Who hasn't had a chance to speak as of yet, or to share their long-term, medium and short-term aims? Claire, have you thought of a short-term, medium-term or long-term aim that you'd like to give yourself moving forward? Oh, there's 2 Claires in here. Wow. Okay, Claire G first, and then we're going to go over to Claire Marshall.
I think one of the first things I'm going to do is talk to my big sister, who's also in the session, about how we do that in our different organisations, and in the context that we're the sort of very rural and not very diverse place that we live. So yeah, I'll give you a message, Emma.
Amazing. I'm going to ask Emma G and Claire G to also sign up to the More Than a Moment pledge, because then you can join the community of organisations in the West Midlands, arts organisations who might be of similar sizes to you, who have gone through this process, and they're just a little bit ahead of you guys. So I invite you to sign up to the pledge, and I think you'll be welcomed into the Midlands as well. So let's head over to Claire Marshall, if you feel comfortable to do so. You're on mute, Claire Marshall.
Unmuted now, I think. Yeah. I'm not very good at talking publicly, so I'm not going to say very much, except to say I've enjoyed being part of this, and the most short-term thing I'm going to do is to check all the links and to look into the work that everyone is doing.
Great, thank you. That's fine, Claire. Thank you for coming and thank you for being present.
100%, and I think that's the step, really, choosing to be present and researching and having a look. I remember a year ago when I was tweeting, well, when I started my Twitter tweet, and it wasn't a big scary like I hate all arts organizations. It was more like, what are we doing here to make change? I can promise you I was so terrified every single step of the way. I was shaking, I was praying to Jesus. I was like, I'm gonna get fired if I tweet, and then something happened. So the fact that, you know, you're choosing to do something is literally the most important step, and so, you know, it's always the hardest as well. So we thank you for doing that.
Yeah, and also just a lot of people have mentioned public accountability is good, and it is, because, you know, people, if you tell someone you're going to do something, you don't do it, people will come to you, and I guess there's like a fear of that, but actually it would be nice if we didn't have to be led by that fear, because actually we want to make this change and we want to do it, and, you know, life can get in the way sometimes, but if it's really embedded into your organization and into your daily life, actually we'll need accountability less and less, because it's a part of our culture and it's a part of our ecosystem. So I guess we're all, the kind of goal should be to get to that point where actually we don't need that public accountability. We don't need those things, because we do it naturally. This is the culture of our organizations, and I think that's what a lot of people here are starting to build, and it will be a journey, but imagine how sweet it will be when you get to that point. So until then, yes, public accountability is great and all those things, but yeah, let's imagine a time where we don't need that, because we're just, you yourself are holding yourself accountable. I'm aware of time. Does anybody have any questions they want to throw at us or the BRAP team? You can put them in the chat if you'd like, or just raise your hand, because I want to hear all the accents. I love a good accent. There's loads of Northerners in the room. Any questions at all? Any thoughts? Anything that struck you? Anything you just want to say? Now's your time to shine. I'm going to look at the More Than a Moment link with Lucy Scott and compare it with what's happening in our organisation or not. And we're going to find more about how BRAP are working with Newcastle Gateshead cultural venues. Brilliant. Does that mean that you have a Geordie accent? Because Wendy, that is my favourite.
I have a Middlesbrough accent because I'm from Middlesbrough. Sorry to disappoint.
Oh no, I love it. I like a Middlesbrough accent as well. I love it. Is there any closing comments you'd like to make, Wendy?
Not really, just that I think that myself and Lucy, who's also on this call, could have a look at that document together. Because actually, as I was reading through it, there were a lot of things there that we go, yes, we do that, and pat ourselves on the back. But actually, you know, are we doing those things in depth? Could we hold ourselves accountable and say what we're not doing and what we're going to do about that? And Lucy and I both work in the contemporary music team, and I think that we could look at that and form some actions for ourselves. But also, I keep hearing that BRAP are working with Newcastle cultural venues. This is making me realise I don't really know what that's about or what's happening, or who's doing what, or whether anything's happening at all. So I want to ask my managing director for the facts about that.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing, Wendy. Anybody else? Oh, thank you, Kate.
Thank you. One thing I would like to say is that we are literally an ecosystem, whether we like it or not. We are in this together. We live in the same society together. We share space together. We might share space together. So let's think about how we can work together and collaboratively and care for each other. You know, that's for me what the 21st century is going to look like. We're in the era of innovation. We can start doing things differently. We can start thinking about, you know, the actually building the future, and that shouldn't feel as scary and as daunting. You know, holding ourselves accountable now means that we have planted the seed for something amazing, and that is literally where we're going. And so, you know, thank you all for coming to this session 2 today. Thank you for sharing time and space, and connect with each other also, because that's how we move forward, and that's how we continue to drive this change as well. I'm sure you all represent some amazing organizations. You should know about each other. We should know about you. We should start connecting, learning, and evidencing the changes that we've made, even if they're small.
Thanks so much, both of you. Me and Asif were playing chicken on who was going to come off mute then from I lost. We just wanted to thank you all so much for being here, and we're very grateful to Elizabeth and Adaya for joining us and creating such a impactful energy in the room. I was just thinking, it's very infrequently that I end up in a space where people are like, I've done something right now whilst we've been talking. I just contacted someone, I just pinged off an email. So to feel the energy of that accountability in the space has been a real pleasure to be part of. So thank you so much as well from the BRAP team. We really appreciate you all taking time out of your early evenings. And Elizabeth and Adaya, thank you so much for cultivating this space for us. It's been a real pleasure to watch you facilitate this conversation, and hopefully we're going to get to work with you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Foo Fighter, I feel like you're the most anonymous person in this room, so we'd love to connect with you. I'm sure the BRAP team will share our emails, but
yeah, find us on Twitter.
Yeah, find us on Twitter. If you don't have Twitter, I'm happy to share my email with anybody in this team, or just check out More Than a Moment as an organisation too. You can drop us an email there, and I'll give you a ring. I'm just typing it in the chat function.
I put the More Than a Moment pledge link in for you in the chat, but if you wanted to add, I know Adaya's just added her email. If you wanted to add your email or your socials, drop them in if you'd like to stay connected with people.
Okay, guys, thank you so much for coming today. Hope you enjoy your dinner. And yeah, remember, stay accountable. I never know how to end a Zoom, so good.
I think you were saying you quite like hearing people's voices, so if people want to just come off mute and say goodbye, that would be nice.
Thank you very much. I'm working on.